for example, in the steel sector, in cement, refineries, chemicals, paper, aluminum, fertilizers, and so on. And it also covers aircraft operators in Europe. If you have a question on aircraft operators, we will have Andrew with us this afternoon from Transport and Environment, and he's the specialist on aviation. So Sandboard has actually come up with a very useful interactive tool. It's called the ETS dashboard. It's essentially a map, and you can see all the different installations covered under the ETS. So you can find the next coal plant, for example, and you can see how much it emits and how much surplus they made, and you can play around with it and compare what does it mean in comparison to other countries, what does it mean in comparison of the sectors, etc. I think we will put aside the computer for that during the break, and Ola is here and she will be happy to explain it to you if it's of interest. In any case, you can sort of see what is the ETS next door, which I think is always very useful. So how does it actually work? We've tried to put the basic principle into this graph that's also in our guide. It works by putting a limit on emissions over time. So you have the limit, I mean, here you have the years, and here you have the total allowances in the system. So you have a limit put over time, and this limit, and that's important, whoops. Oh. This limit goes down. So we want to make sure that our emissions decrease over time, and therefore we put a cap on it that's reduced in a linear way. This is called the linear reduction factor, short LRF. And what's important to know is that what you see here are actually allowances in the system. So these are the permits that you get in order to pollute. So per ton of CO2 that you can emit, you get one pollution permit or one emission allowance. I put it here as well. So if you have 2 billion allowances in the system, that corresponds to 2,000 megaton of CO2. So you see this goes down, but even here in 2020, where our emission is supposedly 21% below 2005 emission levels, you still have a lot of allowances in the system and thereby a lot of CO2 emitted into the air, basically. So that's the general idea. But how does the trading work? Again, we try to put this into this little graph, and I must admit that I also had to look at it intensely to understand it. The first step is it's a market. So it's a market on which pollution permits are being traded. That's the first thing that's important. Here we have the cap, so we have this overall limit put on how much can be emitted. And within this limit, you have installations, some more, some less polluting, who can then trade their emission allowances with one another. So there are emission allowances in this pot, and each company or installation needs to account for how much they emit, and for whatever, like for that amount that they emit, they need to account for. So they need to have enough pollution permits to cover what they emit. How do they get these allowances is the main question. In principle, they should buy these allowances on a common auctioning platform. It's here, it's this little hammer. So the EU gives out allowances to member states based on certain principles. One of them is also wealth. And then the member states auction these allowances on a common platform where all the companies can buy their permits. That's the principal idea. But at the moment, we also have this mechanism, free allowances. So there's a second stream of allowances going into the system, and this is actually quite problematic, which we will see later. These are allowances that are handed out for free to certain industry sectors in order to cover their CO2 needs. Why? It's quite simple. First and foremost, it's clear there are certain sectors that just by way of their production modes emit more CO2 than others. It's easier for certain sectors to reduce CO2 than for others. So it's a way of trying to make the system a bit more fair, trying to get these sectors to also invest into cleaner and less polluting technologies, while, like trying to make them part of the system without basically ruining them. So that's the principal idea behind it. People talk about carbon leakage in this context. That's the idea that certain companies or sectors have a problem with competitiveness outside of Europe because of participating in the carbon market. It's very important to know that there are many studies out there, and all of them show that there is no carbon leakage in Europe. So what does this mean? This means that the system is working well enough to protect European industry, and it means that we need to be a bit careful with how much we actually give out to this industry. In any case, there are these two mechanisms, the free allowances and the auctioning, and then companies have a certain amount of allowances that they can then trade among each other. So this company here might be polluting more than this company here, and this company might have some spare allowances that it can then sell to that company there. So that's the basic principle of the system. The goal is to move towards 100% auctioning, to make it a transparent system, to make it a fair system, and also to make it a cost-effective system. We are on track, but not enough, I could say. Then another important point, of course, it's a market and there's a price, and this price is set by the rules of the market, so it's set by the rules of demand and supply. Yes?
Well, this is combined, free allocation and allocation. So first is sell a certain amount, and then they give some free allowances to everyone, and then ending up.
Yeah, but maybe the next slide makes it a bit more clear, because it's evolved over time. So the question, how is it going? How has it evolved, is exactly tackling this question, because if you look at this, the system has been divided into trading periods. It was set up in 2005 with a trial phase. And then, and this was a very important phase, phase 2, was when it was actually put on its feet, but there were a lot of problems in the system. So back then, the allowances were mainly distributed via free allocation. So the idea was we put the allowances out there to push the development, so to say, and only 4% were being auctioned. There was no harmonized method of distributing these allowances, so member states received allowances and then they distributed them in the way they thought appropriate. And the member states were also the ones setting the national caps, the limits, and they didn't have to put forward a trajectory for emission reduction. So this is how it was done between 2008 and 2012, for example. Of course, there were a number of problems with the system. It was criticized for being not transparent at all, possibly not very fair, and it had the problem that there were already way too many allowances on the market. Okay, now we are in phase 3. It's between, it runs from 2013 to 2020. At the moment, about half of the allowances are auctioned. For instance, the power sector in general has to receive their allowances via auctioning. Then there is a derogation, which we will talk about this afternoon. But in principle, for example, for power, it means that they have to buy their allowances via the auctioning platform that don't receive any free allowances. And then there are free allowances in the system, and these allowances are now distributed via a harmonized system. So there's a system in place that looks at the different sectors, industrial sectors. It looks at their competitiveness, it looks at their emission levels, and it looks at the 10% most efficient installations of each sector. And based on these very efficient installations, so the greenest, cleanest, basically 10% of the sector, it sets harmonized benchmarks. And these determine who gets how much for free. All right? So the good news about this system is that you now have an EU-wide system. You have a list, the so-called carbon leakage list, which lists all these sectors and which determines who gets what. So it's more transparent already.
But this links somehow to VAT criteria.
To?
VAT criteria. Basically the technology, because the system is changing concerning VAT, and it will be mandatory now.
I'm not sure how much we will talk about these things later on. In any case...
Sorry, can you just repeat the question for the people who cannot see on the internet?
Whether it's linked to best developer technologies. This is an internal kind of... the Commission sets this list, and it's linked to their formula for calculating the 10% best performance. So at the moment, we are actually in a process of looking at what's coming next, phase 4, right? So at the moment, we are having negotiations in the European Parliament and in the Council on what will come out of the system in the next period. So these are all these kind of problems are being discussed at the moment. There are a lot of problems with the way that free allowances are allocated. For instance, there are way too many sectors on the list. It's a huge list of sectors, and a lot of them, and I will show this in a minute, have actually been making profits from the system instead of having to pay. So
it's possible to trade between different sectors as well.
It's installations buying the permits that they need. This is how it works.
So the quotas are being given every year, or it's
The quota is being given every year.
No, we have,
so it goes from year to year.
so every year,
If I'm a company, I got this quota, right? 5 years ago.
no, so we have a period, first of all, and then each year a company has to submit an emissions report on how much they have emitted, and it needs to match how many emission allowances they have. So they need to surrender the number of allowances that corresponds to the amount of emissions they have emitted. This is what they need to do every year.
For the period, not for the year.
The free allowances, yes. So they can actually, and this is one of the problems, they can actually save them.
Okay, so you have them for the whole period. If I got one allowance, it's valid for the whole period.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
And then you have a job. Why would I mean, how does the trade happen? If I need new allowances, I go and buy it from auction.
Yes, or like if you go back here, you are here and you want more allowances,
Yes.
you can go to the auctioning platform and get more.
Yeah. So why would I trade with someone else?
Because sometimes you can get a better deal.
There is a price set on carbon. So if we go here, I will come back to this. There is a price set on carbon. So you will pay according to the price that's set on carbon.
The price is set by the seller or by
The market.
participants of auction.
It's the price is set by the market. So
What is market? Market is all the players on the market, right? So if
Yes.
somebody sells something on the market, that means the seller defines the price.
yes, the price is set by the market. So by all the participants on the market and by the principle of how any market kind of functions. I will
I'm
come.
just trying to understand how it's, why would they go for auction if you have already enough? I mean,
Yes.
how is that set?
That's a
Auction
problem.
is one more player.
So that's one of the problems with the system, that if that some people have so many allowances already that they don't need to buy anything. In fact, and I will show this later, some people have so many allowances that they can sell them for a surplus, and they can actually make profits from
That's
this.
the logic of the whole setup. They will get too many allowances, they sell, so somebody who don't have it buys.
Yes.
So I don't
So the idea would be that we don't hand out any allowances for free, but we just have an auctioning platform. This is why I said earlier, the idea is to have this 100% auctioning.
Today, nobody goes for auction because there is already enough allowances they can buy from each other.
Except if you're, for example, a power plant, then you have to auction because you're not on the list. You don't get free allowances. Not everybody gets free allowances.
Yeah, okay, but they don't have a free allowances, but they can buy it from somebody who have too many of them. Why should they go to auction?
But it's essentially the same thing. They're all participants in the market.
So auction is one of the participants of the market.
Auctioning, this is the means of distributing
It's
what's on the
okay.
market.
It just, I can imagine that at a certain moment on the market, you don't have enough allowances, everybody wants more. Or I don't know, or government decided that there should be more allowances, and then they have to bring it to the market. And the question is at what price, and then you do auction. If you have too much, let's do the same with apples.
Yes, yes. It's of course. This is one of the major problems with the system. You're quite right. The problem is why do you participate in this if you get all of this? That's exactly the problem. And this
So in recent years, nobody was going for auction.
So you don't get all your allowances for free. It depends which sector you are in. So not every sector gets all allowances for free. So depending on which sector you are in, you will have to participate in the system in one way or the other. So power installations, unless they fall under the derogation, they have to go for auctioning.
Okay, maybe then the question is, which allowances auction sells? Whom it belongs at the moment when it's being sold?
So the EU distributes to member states these allowances that the member states then auction on a common platform. Most member states auction on one common platform. It's the platform in Leipzig. Poland, Germany, and UK have made use of an opt-out provision. But actually they're contracting, two of them are contracting EEX anyway. So this is basically the member states.
So they do it at the beginning of the period.
Yes.
And then for the rest of the period, you don't go for auction because then you trade with other members of the market.
No, I think, I'm not sure. Can you help me on this?
Each year there are auctions.
Yes, there are auctions.
Not just the beginning, each year there are auctions.
But where they get allowances to have an auction, if this year we got so much allowances on the market, next year you actually want to have less.
Yes, so that's.
So the scenario is actually done every year.
Yes.
For the whole period.
Yes.
The numbers.
Okay.
Here.
So we are coming back to this story. So you cannot move allowances from one year to another.
Yes, you can.
You can. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. This is the point. He has a good point, I think, but this is exactly what's a problem in the current system.
But I don't think it's set up so stupidly. So you have 50 quarters in the first year.
Yes.
You solve it around, right? Or in balls of shortening and giving them for free. So the second year comes. What happens with all those quarters, which you
So they
already
will-
have?
Most of them will be used up for the emissions that were produced.
Yes.
last year.
Okay, so whenever, these allowances are given only for 1 year.
Yes.
And at the end of the year, they're being kind of disappearing.
No, you can-
Emission.
They're auctioned for each year, but you can still, if you didn't use
Yes.
it one
Okay.
year, you can use it in the next.
So,
Okay,
and then,
so if you got too many in the first year, then you can sell it next year.
yes.
All right.
And this is one of the problems that it's also the question what happens at the end of a trading period. So these are one of the this is one of the big things that's being discussed now, because of course it would be ideal to cancel everything at the end of a trading period, to not be able to take this big savings over to the next. This is one of the big problems at the moment in the system. So this is what we are discussing right now. So what's on the table now is the Commission has put forward a proposal, and according to this, we still have a bit more than half of the total allowances to be auctioned. We still have free allowances that are distributed via a harmonized benchmark system. A bit better than before, but still not good enough because it's still too much. And we still have an EU-wide cap that declines each year. It declines a bit higher than previously. Before it was at 1.74%, and now it's supposed to be 2.2%. The negotiations at the moment suggest that the Parliament will go for even a higher linear reduction factor, but still a linear reduction factor that's nowhere where we should get. And this shows it. We've seen this twice already yesterday. It's from the European Environment Agency. So this is where we're coming from. This is our 2020 goal, and this is us in two different scenarios. This one is safe. This one is already off track, and this is actually what we should get to if we take Paris seriously. So you can see, okay, we need to increase ambition. We need to make the system more lenient. We need to have a higher limit, a lower limit. So we need to fix what's there. We need to get rid of the problems in the system, like you just raised. You know, we need to make sure that people cannot carry over allowance from one period to the other. And this is the carbon price, and this is the problem that we have at the moment. So everything that the European Commission calculated is around this 30 euros per ton CO2. And we are actually now around 5. I think yesterday it was around 6 actually. So it's around 5, 6 euros. 6 is already always very good. So, in any case, it's way too low to incentivize those who pollute to actually invest in less polluting technologies. Why? Because it's simply too cheap to pollute. So they can afford to buy more permits, and most of the time they don't even have to buy any. So we are in this situation. We've made this little cartoon because there is too much free allocation. There's a very low carbon price. There's a huge oversupply from previous trading periods. We have the situation where the big polluter, and especially coal, are actually winning. So instead of paying, the polluters have been making massive profits from the system while claiming otherwise. And we have actually focused a lot of our campaign on this problem. And you have a couple of briefings at the end at the back of the room about that. All in all, European industry has made 24 billion euros between 2008 and 2014 from the ETS system. This is, of course, not what the system is there for. Germany has made a lot of profit, followed by the UK, Spain, and France. There have been certain sectors that have made particularly high profits, for instance, steel, especially in Germany. And they have, at the same time, they were going around claiming that the ETS was actually making them less competitive in Europe and that they risked having to relocate their business to places outside of Europe. And this is, of course, not true. So they have been making profits while, at the end of the day, the ones paying the bill will be the European taxpayers, because whatever goes to industry for free does not go to member states and is missing in the public pots, and therefore will have to be compensated by European citizens in the end. And there is a petition ongoing. Carbon Market Watch is part of this petition, and Pan Europe is coordinating it. Sandberg is also a part of it. We have 58,000 something signatures so far, and it's about raising awareness at policymakers level that, okay, guys, the ETS is very important and we need it to work properly. We need to make sure that it actually delivers what it is supposed to deliver, which means clean energy and industry. So we can talk about this in more detail. In any case, we have a lot of materials. We brought some along today. For those who are not so familiar with it, there's this starters kind of point. You can find everything online as well. And yeah, I think we will go in more detail in the next sessions anyway. Thank you.
Thanks. I have a question online, actually from Leon. I'll try to read it the best I can. He's saying we now have 50% auctioned allowances and 43% free allowances. Amongst those who are against reducing the auction share is Poland, which has a large share of coal in the energy mix. Do you believe that by not reducing the number of auctioned allowances, you keep the price low and thus keep coal online, or keep coal like?
By not reduce, this is actually a question for Ushka.
Auctions or free allowance?
No. Like,
by not reducing auctioned allowances?
the number of auctioned allowances, it actually keep the price of carbon low.
I think that person meant free allowances because otherwise.
Makes more sense.
No, that's exactly what they mean. So,
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. I'll try. I hope Leon can hear. Or yeah, maybe he can come. Sorry, but we don't have a Bluetooth microphone.
This is Anya
yet.
speaking.
This is Anya speaking from January.
So a couple of things to clarify. What determines the price is not how many free allowances you give out and how many you auction. It's actually how many.
Stand up, huh?
I can stand up like this. Yes, it's actually how many allowances are in the system. That's what determines the price. So the important thing you need to know is, yes, handing out free allowances is bad because it's basically a subsidy for polluting industries. But in terms of what the climate sees, it doesn't matter if you give them out for free or if you auction them, because what matters is how many allowances you have in the system. And there are way too many allowances in the system. Too many that are given for free and too many that are auctioned. This is why there is such a big surplus that should not be carried over. Now, Poland would like to keep the auctioning, the number of allowances that are auctioned fairly high, because they have a special provision that allows them to give a certain percentage of that auction share free to their power sector. And they want to ensure that the number of allowances they have to auction and to give out for free is as high as possible. This is why, indeed, Poland kind of has a a position that is in line with ours, which means we shouldn't decrease the number of auctioned allowances.
And we will actually talk about this in the next session, like in depth. We will talk about the role of the ETS in transition away from coal, and it will be about this exclusively. So,
Other questions? Okay. Time is running up, so this is a great transition for our next presenter, actually. Thank you so much, Agnes, for the presentation. And now can I have a program somewhere? Oh, you, yeah. I will welcome Alexandra or Ola. Sorry, can you just tell me what I should do then?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so exactly what Agnes said is that now we will have the session. How ETS can have an impact also on the transitioning away from the coal in CE countries and about certain derogations that are in the ETS already or are planned for the phase 4. So first we'll have that will tell us something about the 10C derogation that I hope that many of you heard before, and how it went in the phase 3. What are the lessons learned for the next phase? Then after Urszka, we will have Ola from Sandbeck, who will tell us something more about the Modernization Fund, and then Veronika from Hill, who will talk about the linkages between air pollution and health impacts and coal. Also with view of the climate, of course. And basically after each speaker, we'll have 5 minutes for questions. Yeah, so that's it.
Can Stacey is here with me? Okay. Yes.
Hello, everyone. Well, I met most of you in the room yesterday already, but for those of you following online, my name is Urszka Trung. I work for Carbon Market Watch. And today I would like to give you a brief introduction to one of the EU ETS mechanisms that is available to Central and Eastern European member states and is meant to help them modernize their power sector. So hopefully through this short presentation you'll have a better understanding on what this so-called Article 10C is, what are the main challenges, and what is actually at stake in the current EU ETS revision process. So, as mentioned yesterday, today is quite a special day when the Paris Agreement enters into force. So it's quite symbolic. We're here talking about climate change. It's an agreement that calls on 195 nations to limit their global warming below 2 Celsius. And if the EU is also to pursue this objective, it will need to significantly increase its climate action. And this is where the EU ETS can be a very useful tool. Among other things that Agnes already mentioned, as to setting the carbon price and so on, also by making sure that the public funds that go through the EU ETS are spent wisely and they do not provide support for unsustainable systems such as coal-fired generation. And for the next phase, which starts after 2020, the EU leaders have decided to set a range of new funds, namely the Modernization Fund, which we will hear about right after, the Innovation Fund, which is to support innovative and breakthrough technologies, Just Transition Fund, which is to address basically the challenges that workers face in transition, and then we have the so-called Article 10C, which I will explain to you now. what is it all about? So Article 10C, I swear it's more interesting than it sounds. It doesn't have any more spicy name, unfortunately, except transitional free allocation. So as Agnes explained, we're right now in the third trading period in the EU ETS. And in this period, the power sector doesn't get free pollution permits. So if a power plant wants to pollute, then it needs to buy it from auctioning. However, an exemption has been made for some of the newer member states that can still keep giving free pollution permits or allowances, as we call them, to their power plants by the end of this period. It was actually the Central and Eastern European member states who asked to be exempt from this full auctioning rule in the power sector in order to easily cope with the cost of transition and to prevent sharp increases in electricity prices in households. So the rules to this exemption are laid down in Article 10C of the EU ETS directive. So what this derogation says is, yes, these member states can keep giving free pollution permits to their power plants under the condition that these power plants invest the equal monetary value of these free allowances into modernizing their power sector and diversifying sources of supply. So this in practice means if a member state, let's say Poland, gives away free allowances with a value of 7 billion to their power plants, these power plants need to invest 7 billion into modernization and diversification of their energy system. So for this period right now, 10 member states were eligible to make use of this derogation, but only 8 decided to do so because these allowances are taken from their auctioning volumes. So actually we're talking about public money, because if these were sold on the market, they would generate public revenues. For this phase, the European Commission has approved for all these member states for this period up to 600 million allowances with a market value of 12 billion that these member states can give to these power plants. Here is the breakdown of this monetary value of these allowances. So you can see that Poland gets the big piece of the pie, 7.5 billion that they can distribute to their power plants. And then the smallest amount is in Lithuania, 51 million. So these are the 8 member states that currently can make use of this derogation. So these member states had to submit national investment plans. These are basically plans where they list the investments that they aim to take in this period. And they needed to be kind of in line with this core principles, such as they are supposed to decarbonize the power sector, and the underlying objective was that investments in this period would contribute to modernization of the power sector, so there would be no need for such derogation in the future. But here we are again discussing what will be the Article 10C after 2020. So it's actually, it will continue after 2020. Sorry, yes.
I ask, so if you want to, for example, invest in coal-firing, you have a coal plant that wants now to burn coal together with biomass.
Yeah.
Technically speaking, according to the article and the Commission's guidelines, because I know there were guidelines as well for the national. Is this putting us in a direction of emitting, towards a low carbon future? If you're burning less coal, or burning more biomass, is it?
Do you need to write the question? So the question was about basically investing in co-firing coal and biomass, the problem is that they're pushing for the next period that that also heating would be one of the sectors supported through this derogation. And the issue is that in many countries, heating is co-generated by coal, and generated by coal. So this would mean there would be a lot of free allowances available to CHPs in this next period. But if you're asking,
but it was allowed under
here it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't prohibited.
Good arguments.
Yes,
That's what it was
exactly. It wasn't prohibited. Heating was still in, but now for the next period, cogeneration and heating distribution is specifically in after 2020. So they will be able to benefit from this as well. No, it's okay. What is not in these principles or guidance is actually project-specific criteria, what kind of technologies they can use now. And actually, this is what brings us to the main issue of this derogation, is that it's being largely misused to fund the investments in the existing fossil fuel capacity or even new fossil fuel capacity in these countries. If we look at example of Poland, 82% of the 7.5 billion that we saw before was planned at the beginning of this period to be used for modernization of existing fossil fuel capacity, and this includes investments in Bevrachtel, I'm sorry for my pronunciations, which is the second biggest coal-fired power plant in the world and the biggest one in Europe, where these free allowances were able to be distributed and used for modernization of 12 lignite-fired blocks, and even building one new lignite block. And yes, they also specified in their national plans that 8% of their planned investments will go into renewable energy, but 7% is actually biomass co-fired with coal. And then we see similar examples in Czech Republic and Romania. In Czech Republic, where almost half of investments relate to upgrading coal power plants and also contributing to investments which are to increase coal consumption in the future. And then Romania, which I'm now referring to the initial investment plan, which was supposed to support new fossil support for new fossil fuel production, including imported hard coal and lignite. Why I'm saying planned investments? Because these are the national investment plans that were approved at the beginning of the period, but if for some reason the power generators don't want to carry out these investments, or for some reasons can't, then they need to return the value of free allowances back to the member states, so this money is auctioned. So this has happened in case of Romania and Bulgaria when this was actually given back to their auctioning volumes of the member states. But we will have more specific details about country experience in the next session. So I just want to show you actually the whole picture. So we have a mechanism which is supposed to help member states modernize and decarbonize their power sector, but already in the first year of this derogation, 90% of investments were used to support existing fossil fuel capacity, and only 10% went into renewable. And to date, so actually between 2013 till last year, a majority of these free pollution permits were given to lignite-fired and coal power plants. You can see here the graphs. So the blue part is lignite, and the green one is hard coal. It's a bit hard to track what are actually the projects, what investments have been undertaken in these power plants, and this actually brings us to the next issue, and this is a big lack of transparency in the system. Already when member states submitted their national investment plans, this was the kind of, this was the kind of description you got for, let's say, in Poland for Bełchatów. So Modernizacja B1, and this is all. So it's really hard to actually assess or provide a valuable input on what this investment will be about. And also when it comes to public consultation, there was a very short window of opportunity for public to provide input, or even some information was hidden from them, especially regarding some contested investments. So there is a huge problem with transparency also in the monitoring, because every year member states need to submit their annual reports, and these annual reports are usually very vague. They're available in, of course, national languages, and there's no uniform system of how member states need to report how they used these investments. So basically, what is happening now is that, as we know, the EU is reforming the EU ETS system. This also means that the Article 10C debate is now on the table, and the discussion has currently is taking place in the Parliament, where there are two committees. Two committees. One is the ITRE, the Industry Committee, and the ENVI Committee, which is actually leading on the file. So 2 or 3 weeks ago, the Industry Committee already voted on their position on this Article 10C, and they endorsed the compromise, which, yes, it does provide some more stringent requirements in relation to coal. So they say does not contribute to new coal-fired energy generation, and that greenhouse gas per kilowatt hour shall not exceed 450 grams of CO2 equivalent, which in theory excludes coal, but the way that project or installation is defined, it's a bit vague, because it's not clear whether it applies to the whole installation or just the project that is being invested in. On the other hand, it's the very bad part is that there is no criteria for small projects meaning for projects under 10 million euros, and they want to extend the eligibility of these free allowances to also Greece. So Greece could, in theory, actually build 2 new lignite plants with investments for this derogation. Also, Pavel, as you were asking before, they don't want any reference to best available techniques in this derogation, and also, again, they don't put a stop date to this exemption for getting free allowances in the power sector. What's happening next is that currently the Environmental Committee is also forming their compromise, and they're actually voting on it in 1 month. So it's a very relevant time right now, and we're working with a number of organizations to try to influence this process and provide voting recommendations on this issue. And then it's expected that the final vote in the plenary will take place next year in February. So basically what we're asking for is, ideally we would like to see no continuation of Article 10C, because it has not really fit its purpose. It was supposed to help countries most in need of transition to modernize, decarbonize their power sector, but it's actually subsidizing investments that lead to prolonged coal dependency in this country. So either Article 10C is scratched, or it provides the shift of investments to more sustainable energy system, such as renewable energy, energy efficiency. And of course, we want to see a very transparent process that provides for a meaningful input from public. I'm now already over time. I just want to mention that we also have a policy brief on this topic from earlier in the year, where you can find you can find more information on this derogation. And I also want to stress that after this session, we will have an interactive session on country experience. So representatives from Poland, Romania, and Czech Republic will actually be presenting the story behind the use of this derogation. So yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Oh, sorry. For nuclear power in national investment plans, there was in Poland there was nuclear power also included as one or two investments, no?
Yeah, so actually in the Polish investment fund there is nuclear power plant by PG Energetyka Jądrowa, but so far it was not spent in a way because they not only have to be included in this national investment plan, but then they need to report if the actual investment happened, because for many positions they actually have like few options depending on what would be done in the end. So those free allowances for the nuclear power station in Poland were not spent so far.
Not yet. So in case of Poland, actually 60% of this 7.5 billion has not been spent yet. So there's still a chance that they do it or they retrieve it back to their auction volumes. But the way the system works, that in most member states, the value of allowances is given to the power plants upon evidence that this investment has been undertaken. So while in case of Poland, nuclear investments in nuclear is included, it has not been undertaken.
And then the second issue is also that we have the list of the possible investments that were included in the national investment plan, but we do not know how much they are supposed to work. Like that's not public information. So we don't know if there will be some investment in the nuclear power station, is it like should work?
So it's reported. It's reported for back. It's every year. It's reported for what has been undertaken. So not all investments in the national plan that were submitted in 2012 need to be undertaken, but indeed they have the option. They have the option to distribute these free pollution permits to the value of free pollution permits to also nuclear. Exactly. So in this period, it's really important that we push for strict criteria that really. Yeah. Sorry.
Position is actually calling for also exclusion of explicit exclusion of nuclear and coal. And the reason I think why it's not in here is because it's very unlikely that it will actually be used for nuclear exactly for that reason. It will be a drop in the bucket.
Exactly. It's also too expensive to use this. Yes.
What is the amount?
So
we don't know.
Sorry, for the next period, you mean? No. Sorry. What is the amount of money for? So, like I said, for Poland, it's 7.5 billion for 7 years, which that's the total. So they've used 60% of this. Sorry, they haven't used 60% of this yet. So it's up to them to decide at the end whether they will carry through this investment, but they have the possibility. The European Commission has approved it at the beginning of the derogation.
So you said 60 or 16?
60. Yeah, but we need to know that it has started in 2013, we're now in 2015, so they still have technically 5 years. Yeah. 60. With nuclear?
Has there been any explanation in other countries regarding such situation?
If there has been experience of undertaking nuclear through this derogation, I believe not. No. Because also the amounts, if you see other countries, they don't have enough of volume to be funding nuclear. It would probably only be in Poland that they could.
I'm sorry, but we have time only for like one more question.
Anybody has a question, but I have why I was pushing for circular economy yesterday? Because this push, for example, to turn power plants or any energy production sector to use waste, it would have no limits between waste hierarchy and circular economy. I think it will lead to having to, we are already observing it in Poland, like the want to replace existing power plants or construct new replacing coal into waste incinerator or coal incinerators. And I think that it will be the same in other countries because it gives two benefits. First of all, they don't need to buy the coal, but they get money to burn waste, and they get benefit from renewable energy, at least part of the waste if you buy it. So.
Yeah.
So the remark is on the importance of the circular economy as well, in order to avoid that power plants burn waste to make energy, because this can be a bad incentive as well.
Okay, thank you. Before
Ola from Sandbag.
Ola from Sandbag. Well, thank you very much for inviting me here to speak today on the topic of Modernization Fund to Carbon Market Watch and to Polska Zielona Sieć. First of all, maybe it's a short word of introduction. I work for Sandbag Climate Campaign, which is the think tank that basically makes analysis on the carbon markets. And we specialize in providing with that analysis key stakeholders of the EU ETS reform. And by that, I mean politicians, NGOs, industry leaders, everybody who basically has a say in that. My role within Sandbag is to provide engagement with the member states' capitals and to meet with groups like you guys to basically talk you through the analysis we've done that could be supportive to the EU ETS reform in a way that the system could deliver meaningful low carbon investments and a meaningful carbon price that could drive such. I think that on the topic of this panel, it's very important to say that moving away from coal in Central and Eastern Europe will require a very significant investment. Because of that, we believe that the so-called Modernization Fund, the topic of my today's intervention, is one of the key tools in a box for talking to your governments about why the EU ETS could actually be a positive trend. The Modernization Fund is available exclusively to Central and Eastern European governments, and I think this is probably the key point to bear in mind when talking about its role in the EU ETS reform. For that reason, I think it's quite important for us to understand today, I would say, 4 issues. So to smooth the perception of the EU ETS reform for Central and Eastern European governments, I think we should first think of what is the Modernization Fund and why Central and Eastern European countries are entitled to such exclusive provision. Second, what sort of investments can be sponsored by this fund? Third, how much money will be actually available under this fund? And that goes very much to, I think, the last question from the previous conversation. I will talk a little bit about it in detail. And then the fourth, how you as NGOs could actually support this phase for reform in a way that that delivers significant and meaningful outcomes.
Political will.
Yes, and I would really like to increase your political will as well to work on this file, because it's a difficult beast. Well, first of all, I think that it's, well, we should start saying that Central and Eastern European countries are not a monolith bloc. They're very diverse still in their approach to the EU climate policies. However, if you wanted to look for a common feature in between all of us, I would say there are three. First is the outdated energy system infrastructure that includes predominantly fossil fuels and leaking transition networks. Second, it's regulated energy prices for end consumers that allow the governments to keep them low and attainable for the population and industry. And third is, of course, the relatively lower GDP per capita in the region as compared to the Western European countries. Having that in mind, the mixture of these three factors makes it extremely difficult to make a discussion about environmental issues with Eastern European governments not politically contentious. The Central and Eastern governments argued that there are 2 points. First, that utilities in Western Europe can pass through the cost of CO2 allowances. As you remember from Agnes' presentation, these are not for free for the power sector as such in phase 3, so that they can pass through this cost to the prices for end consumers. And that because of the 3 factors that I've mentioned just a second ago, the Central and Eastern European governments are not able to do that, and they need to regulate their prices. A second claim from the Central and Eastern European governments is that if they were to decarbonize their energy sectors to avoid paying so much for carbon permits, they would again have to pass through the cost of this investment, investment forced by the EU ETS to the energy and electricity prices, and that again wouldn't be possible because of the, well, pretty much because of the smaller resources available for the population to pay these bills. We've had governments being overthrown on this sort of basis. So this is basically their biggest concern. And this is largely why in October 2014, the heads of states decided that not only the Article 10C derogation will be extended to the post-2020 ETS period, but also on top of that, the Central and Eastern European countries will receive 2% of the overall cap of EU ETS allowances as support to the modernization of their energy sectors. These allowances will go to the countries I've basically marked with an arrow. These are the countries that had in 2013 their GDP per capita below the 60% of the EU average. I think now that story has become pretty clear. As you also can see, these are the countries that are having regulated low electricity prices. So that's pretty much the dynamic between the reform and the carbon price and the modernization fund, and the lack of political will among our governments to support it. Well, however you look at that, to keep the prices, the energy bills low with the modernization fund, I guess you could go 2 ways about that. And very purposefully, I added the Polish Electricity Association data on that slide, because it presents the view that you can modernize the energy sector mostly through investments in power generation, really. So this is the presentation, this is the analysis made by the Ernst & Young for the Polish Electricity Association, which shows that Poland expects to have to pay 60 billion euros to decarbonize the energy sector till 2030, so they can achieve the goal of minus 30% on the levels from 2005. Don't ask me why they actually made that analysis, because no, but ETS doesn't ask them to do that, but they have produced such an analysis. Below, I'm also showing you what sort of investments they find would be the most expensive in this 60 billion euros. So this is the power generation only on one hand, and only one country out of 10 that we are talking about. On the right, I presented you with the Commission's estimates that are made for 10 Central and Eastern European countries, and that are made not only for investments in power generation, but also for investments that include energy efficiency measures and power transition measures. As you can see, we're comparing one country power generation with 10 countries modernization of whole energy sector. It's basically very, very important to have it in mind that the low energy bills can be kept also in the way proposed by the Commission, which is cheaper and more diverse. Oh, I see this is my previous presentation, not the one I sent you yesterday. That's nice. Well, so let's skip this slide. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit lost. So where are we? We're in the value of the funds. All right, the value of the funds. I also have 5 minutes, so probably I will make my presentation shorter. I think it's the thing that here it needs to be said is the modernization fund is made out of ETS allowances, and these allowances are not these are not money. Their value will depend on the carbon price after 2020. And Commission was basically estimating that if the price was on average 25.8 during the whole phase, the modernization fund could have over 7 billion euros for our countries to use. However, with the prices being as low as they are now, and if they kept this way, this value would be only around 2 billion euros, and that's not that much, to be perfectly honest. So it's not an amount of money that would be very much convincing to anybody. Because of that, it's very important that we move up the carbon price and that we decrease supply of allowances at the ETS market, so that these sort of funds can actually bring real change and substantial low carbon investments. We've missed some slides I added yesterday, but so I will only say that this is our newest analysis. You can also find very well explained in the briefing I've handed. Pretty much, at Sandbach, we made an analysis showing what would happen to the value of modernization fund if the cap for phase 4 would be rebased in line with real emissions, which would make the reform to take off the market the surplus of over 3 billion allowances. This is the reform we are very strongly supporting, along with other reform options on decrease of supply of allowances in phase 4. And the results you can see here are showing that in our scenario, basically the value of the modernization fund would increase by 32% if such move was being made. In scenario presented by Thomson Reuters, that would be 16%, but still quite significant. It's good to bear it in mind because it shows that the EU ETS reform is in interest, actually, of Central and Eastern European member states who plan for modernization of their energy sector. Just to say, Modernization Fund is not the only fund that can be talked about in the similar way. Urška has presented you with many of these. I wanted to add the so-called, well, we call it Solidarity Fund. It's named for allowances that are given also to Central and Eastern European member states for similar reasons, for being poor member states, that right now go to Treasury's pockets. But as you can see, also comparing that with Modernization Fund, there is a possibility they will have a very substantial value after 2020. So if you sum up all of these resources for your country, basically what you can do is, the previous presentation was showing that here, is you can go to your governments, you can go to the stakeholders, no worries, and you can basically talk to them how this money can be spent. Especially in Poland, they will need this money after 2020 because the structural funds are finishing. So I think the best way the NGOs can help us is basically by finding good examples of low carbon investments very far away from what was being talked about before, and by going to local stakeholders such as city mayors, to go to local administration and to show them where they can get money from to support such investments. I won't go into detail on that. The presentation will be sent. There are links everywhere to also other NGOs work on the same topic. So I would very much encourage you to read that. I think I need to finish, so that will have to be unfortunately left to the to your own reading. The last word, completely last word, and that is we need you to participate in investment selection process. We don't want the experience with Article 10C derogation to occur again. That's why, although Sandberg proposes that the governance of the Modernization Fund should be in hands of the member states, we also envision a very strong role of civil society in the process of selecting investments, or in the process of monitoring investments. And I guess for all of the resources, you can turn to all of us. I'm very looking forward to you to see the final presentation, because that was actually a draft and this is a little bit embarrassing, but well, thank you.
Okay, do you have questions? Everything's clear? Okay.
You know, on the slide number 2, there was this of 3 energy sources, and this is not an energy mix, not a split for resources, but the split of the expenditures, right? Of the
What's the question?
I just wanted to make sure that it's not the energy mix, but
No, yes, sorry. So the question about this slide was to what the percentage refers, and is it the split in the energy mix, or is it referring to investment value? And it's referring to investment value. So the Polish Electricity Association has made this with Ernst & Young for the capex, that the capital expenditure costs that they're foreseeing for the period up till 2030, and out of this 60 billion. They assume that 29 is PV, 22 wind, 20 nuclear, and the same I've done with the data that Commission has provided, which you can find in the link in Annex 10. Basically, I also calculate, I did calculate some stuff together, and that would be the total cost. It would be 286 billion outlays, and this is the percentage of the cost. Yeah.
Does the association include any energy efficiency measures?
Thank you. The question was, did the association include any energy efficiency measures? No, they didn't, and that's why I found it's very interesting to compare these two graphs, because you can look at the same problem from different angles, right? And if the idea is to decrease or keep low the energy bill to end consumer, yes, you can claim it to do it directly through power generation, but at the same time we know that you can pay smaller bills by not paying bills for instance, energy you don't use. So that's why, that's why I wanted you to present with these two points of view, and probably leave you to judge which way you would like to argue.
It's interesting because what I read is that we have a huge problem with energy distribution lines, and they are outdated, so they need to be replaced and more efficient as well. So why they didn't measure it completely still?
It is, but what needs to be taken from this meeting is that Modernization Fund also 10C derogation, to be honest, can be used both for improving the transition networks. So there are plenty of examples of investments that could be, I think, a win-win both for climate movement and for the government, because this, as you said, these investments need to be done. And yeah, and I think we're trying to find basically this common ground where we can facilitate our aims, but at the same time interest them in something that should be of their interest, as improving transition networks. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, coming from Ukraine, I have a question. Like, if what I've learned is that Eastern European countries have many exemptions from the system, and the question is, does it still stimulate emission reductions in these countries, the ETS? And in terms of additional funds the countries have, is it cost efficient?
It's a very good question. The question was, if the Eastern European countries have so many exemptions from the system, does it still stimulate investments in low carbon investments? And the second part of the question was, is it cost effective? So to answer the first question, Modernization Fund is not an exemption. It has a very similar objective to 10C derogation, but this is not an exemption. This is actually a funding mechanism. So does it stimulate investments? Yes, of course, because it gives money for this investment. So it's a little bit, in this moment, irrelated to carbon price, if you see what I mean. It's just a additional pot of money to facilitate such investments. Second question, are they cost efficient? Well, I think, again, it's nice that we start with this slide. This is very much up to the member states to decide, what sort of investments they would like to pursue. The Commission on their side is doing the most, what is possible to make them cost efficient. So the negotiation, for instance, is now about, should the money just be given to enterprises, or should you use more sophisticated financial mechanisms such as secured loans, or well, there are many financial instruments basically that are different to grants, which, for instance, could be more cost efficient. But this discussion is actually ongoing. It won't be even a part. These sort of solutions are not going to be a part of the directive. This is too detailed. So these are going to be decided in so-called delegated acts on a later stage. But this is a very good question. We need to make sure this money is spent cost effectively. However, that will be discussed a little bit later. The exact modes of how you transfer the money, and yeah.
No, my question was not like cost efficiency of the specific funds, but in general the system. As I mentioned, that Poland is not part of the EU ETS, but has its own ETS. And as I understand, this money, they come from overall systems,
yes,
funds, and then if these funds cannot exist, and would the system still make sense, like in terms of emission reductions of the companies just within the Poland? Because we have to, in Ukraine, we have to introduce EU ETS under the association agreement, and the question is, like, would it work? Does it make sense? And then, as I see in the Eastern European countries, there are like so many flexibilities, and the targets are also ambitious.
The target is the same for everybody, and basically, so as Agnes was explaining at the beginning, the exemptions are really a little bit, well, forget about the industry. Exemptions to industry are for all countries, not only Central and Eastern Europe. The exemptions for Central and Eastern Europe we talked about are rather related to, I cannot move it, well, to the first slide that I showed. This is where I spent far too much time of my presentation, because I really wanted to explain that the main arguments of Eastern European governments is that whatever they do, they lose with the ETS. This is their argument, because if they, if they pollute for the power sector, they lose because they cannot pass through the cost of that to the people like us, because we wouldn't be able to afford the electricity bill. But if they decide to invest to stop polluting, as the system would require them, again, they lose because they don't have this money for investment, and they wouldn't have done it if ETS wasn't in place, if that makes sense. So they sort of present themselves as, lose, whatever happens. That's why they're getting these funds. In a way, I don't want to answer your question. It is a lot of support to Central and Eastern Europe, which Western countries don't have. So if Ukraine were to join, I would expect that you would get these sort of supportive mechanisms too. It would still facilitate the transition. Just, you would get more money for that, if that makes sense.
So maybe like one sentence to add, like in terms of if it can actually help facilitate the actual transition. Now it's all about what will be there after the revision of the ETS, and if we manage to pass all of the provisions that would actually exclude the investments in coal power sector, so this mechanism are not being misused as they are at the moment, as it was shown at Urszka's presentation. So that's where we also need all of you to help us make it happen. And just last question, yeah?
My question about the Modernization Fund, does it also cover interconnects? Because for us, power is being traded at Nord Pool, and basically power is priced limited only by the capacity of interconnects.
Mm-hmm. It's a very good question. Will Modernization Fund cover interconnections? Well, I would expect it will. This is a new mechanism, so we haven't had it till now. So this is all being negotiated. However, the Council already gave instructions that it should be a modernization of energy sector as opposed to electricity sector, if you see what I mean. And also they already said it should go to energy efficiency. So, having said that, if interconnections were covered already by 10C in phase 3, plus the Council has extended the definition to energy sector now, I would be extremely surprised if that is not covered. So yeah, you can expect that, and you should definitely lobby for that.
Maybe to add connectivity is a priority in the Commission as well, and the energy union. So yes, I think we can be quite sure
that this is going to happen. Yes. Okay, I think
Yeah,
it needs to go. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Sorry for the slide.
And this is the briefing. It's a little bit geeky, but I hope you can still have a little bit of read about what I was hoping to say to this.
Excuse me, I have to leave you. So thank you very much. It was great meeting you. Enjoy the rest of the workshop. Have a safe trip back. And hope to see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Right. Thanks for being here. And please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello once again to everyone that I haven't met yesterday or before, and hello to all the guys behind computers. My name is Weronika Piestrzyńska, and I work for the Health and Environment Alliance, an office in Warsaw, in Poland. And thank you very much also for the invitation and the chance to contribute to this workshop. I would like to speak about something that we normally work on in Poland, and it's health. And today I will link it with air quality and climate change with a special regard to the CE countries. Just a couple of words about why should I be speaking about health, because in your work it's also a very important argument that you all use almost, I guess, in every narrative, apart from environmental issues. Our organization gathers over 70 NGOs, institutions, scientific institutes, health insurers, doctors, nurses, patients, all groups gathered around health issues. And our mission and role is to engage those communities into the debates on environmental and health issues. At the European level, we work on several policy areas, including climate change and air quality. And in Poland, we work specifically on air quality, air pollution. And what's our focal point, and what I would like to start about today is that coal is the single greatest threat to the civilization and all life on our planet. These are words of the climate scientist James Hansen. And why is it so important in our work, and why we linked coal so much with health? For some of you, what I will be speaking about is obvious and you already know it, but I would like to quickly summarize the coal impact into human body and human health and public health in the world, and bring up some important facts, which you probably may know, but just to wrap up. Air pollution causes around 7 million premature deaths per year in the world, including indoor air quality and outdoor air quality. These are data of the WHO. And in the European Union, it's almost 500,000. It's over 430,000 in the EU. And if you think about the limits that are treated like the safe limits for human being and human health set up by the WHO, World Health Organization, almost 90% of the world's population live in areas that exceed those limits. Of course, country limits are much less strict. In the EU, in particular countries, they differ sometimes. But in general, almost 90% of people breathe highly polluted air. And another issue, I've got only 10 or 15 minutes, so I cannot develop every area I'd like to speak about. But just very quickly, it's not only an issue of health and suffering and premature deaths, it's also an issue of economy, because air pollution causes external health costs, which are calculated. There are certain ways to calculate those costs, and they're enormous in the whole world. You can imagine that in 2013, the only external health costs connected with the premature deaths were around the size of the GDP of India, Canada, and Mexico combined altogether. So they are really extremely high. And to summarize, both air pollution and climate change present serious risks to public health, and air pollution is being treated like the biggest environmental threat to the public health in the current world. So very quickly, how it works in practice. When we burn fossil fuels, when we burn coal, of course there are many substances and pollutants emitted, like you can see sulfur dioxides, nitrogen oxides, or ammonia, and particulate matter. It's a very small particle. It's a couple of tens times smaller. The diameter is smaller than a human hair. And it combines in the air all together, creating something that is called secondary pollution, which can get into the human body by veins, by lungs, any other way it can get in to the human body and cause very bad consequences for the human health. So where is the answer?
The red. No, red.
So you can see here the division of organs that are being impacted by air pollution. It's brain, heart, lungs, pancreas, fetus, but also many other organs, because we think that it's all holistic. And if there is a high impact on the lungs, then there are certain very serious consequences for any other part of the human body. And very often we think that breathing bad polluted air means having problems with respiratory system and causing respiratory diseases, which is not true, because it's a huge range of cardiovascular diseases, of cancers, of heart attacks, like you can see here, of prenatal problems, diabetes, Alzheimer. Every month we work on some new evidences based on international researches concerning air pollution health impact. And what's also important is that we can divide them into short-term impacts, long-term impacts, and some further health effects. So short-term impacts are these diseases like cardiovascular diseases, incidence of asthma, higher death rates. Long-term, it's something that accumulates in every generation and also influence public health significantly, like incidence of very common lung cancer or bladder cancer, or increasing infant mortality or reduced life expectancy. And further health effects are, for example, low birth weight in another generation, or impaired cognitive development in infants, or impaired cognitive function in adults, and so on. So it's a huge range of effects. However, not only these pollutants that I talked about are impacting human health and public health in the world. When thinking about burning fossil fuels, you've got also another part of impacts through climate change. And greenhouse gases are not so much directly causing serious consequences to the human health. Like, for example, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons like benzopyrene, which is highly carcinogenic, but they do cause another set of impacts through causing climate change. So climate change affects social and environmental determinants of health, like cleaner, safe drinking water, sufficient food production, or secure shelter. There is also a huge range of mental illnesses and diseases connected with these social determinants of health. It is estimated that between 2030 and 2050, climate change is expected to cause 250,000 additional deaths per year from malnutrition, malaria, diarrhea, and heat stress, and infectious diseases, for example. So it's not direct impact, but it's also visible, and it increases mortality and also impacts public health in the world. The direct damage to health is estimated to be from $2 to $4 billion per year by 2030. And it's the same with air pollution worldwide. Also, mostly in developing countries, there are the most problems, and those countries will be the least able to cope without assistance to prepare and respond to this impact. And reducing emissions of greenhouse gases can result in improved health, particularly through reduced air pollution. I'd like to bring up a report that we launched together with Can Europe, Sandbach, and WWF in July this year. It's a first ever analysis of cross-border health impacts of air pollution from coal use in electricity generation in the European Union. It's particularly important to highlight here that in Poland, for example, we do have several sources, like everywhere, of air pollution. I've got 5 minutes.
Yes.
Unbelievable. Okay. Okay. It's an analysis of transboundary air pollution from the high-stack emission from power plants in Europe. And this analysis concerns 257 coal power plants from all over Europe, which you can see here. And its aim was to show how emissions in particular countries impact air quality, and emissions are being transported to other countries, and what kind of impact they cause there. So a very important part of this report was analyzing specific health impact of these power plants in particular countries by particular utility, and dividing it into particular health impacts. So it was found out that almost 23,000 of premature deaths in 2013, it was a year of the latest available data, were caused by the coal power plants in Europe, in the European Union, and they were responsible for almost 12,000 of new cases of chronic bronchitis and over 20,000 of hospital admissions, and also caused significant external health costs, which you can see here. Very quickly, as I don't have enough time to speak about all of this, you can see something we call blame matrix. So how emissions from one country impact air quality in another country and cause particular health impact and consequences. What's important that coal plants in Germany and Poland alone cause over 7,000 premature deaths abroad, almost 5,000 from Poland and 2.5 from Germany. And interesting case of France that it's is the biggest importer of health impacts. More than 1,200 premature deaths were caused by pollution from Germany, UK, Poland, Spain, and the Czech Republic alone. Okay, so I think we can click on this one. And we also created a list of the coal plants with the biggest impact on health from the particulate matter 2.5, and divided it into premature deaths, chronic bronchitis, hospital admission, lost working days, also part of external health costs, and asthma attacks in children, also comparing it with health costs and health cost meridian. We can see a winner still. Sorry?
Does anybody like this you?
No. And like the arguments from the Eurocoal were just set, basically.
Yeah. And we can see though how to in the first place, also coal plants from Bulgaria, Poland, UK here in the first 5 places. But also there was a summary of the 30 most polluting, biggest emitters, sorry, of the CO2. Again, though how to in the first place, and then Germany, United Kingdom, Italy, and again Poland. But there was a follow-up of this report. We didn't end up with 1 minute. I can see it. We didn't end up with this very pessimistic statement that it's very bad. But referring to the current discussion on the breath and bath regulation, so the IED directive, there was a second part of the report which calculated how much lives and how much health can be saved through implementing good and effective regulation on the IED directive. So more than half of the European coal power plants have been granted special permission to pollute beyond the level set in laws designed to control emissions. It's about derogations, which have been also mentioned. It's a very important point. I don't know, 3 minutes. Okay, thank you. I hope I will have still 3 minutes to tell about this. And I guess the main conclusion from this report is that improved environmental performance standards and stricter limits could help tackle air pollution and stop increasing numbers of these premature deaths and health problems. That's a quick summary how particular regulations like already delayed IED limits can save lives. These are breath limits, so you can see that from 23,000 through more than 11,000 premature deaths if the IED limits were introduced, to almost 9,000 with the breath limits, and more than 2,500 of the VAT, and to renewables, which is 0, so saving 23,000 of life. How can it look when the specific regulations can be implemented? Coming back to the derogations, more than half of the European coal power plants currently enjoys derogations, and these plants were responsible for almost 14,000 deaths in 2013, which was 60% of all deaths that we calculated in this report. So 60% of deaths are because of the derogations. There are specific regulations, but they are not being implemented by 60% of the European coal plants. There are different types of derogations. I wouldn't explain what they concern, but it's depending on the type of the utility, country, and so on. There are many conditions. Some coal power plants, as you can see here, use multiple derogations. Some use only one, but CEE region is a significant one here, as you can see, a concentration of the coal power plants currently using derogations. And here also we can see the Czech Republic, Poland, Romania, Bulgaria. Here are also one of the leaders in using this derogation. However, in a previous presentation, the Article 10C of the EU ETS directive was mentioned. So another exemption to pollutant permission and derogation, which give free allowances to electricity installation under the conditions that were already mentioned. And about this permission to pollute and Article 10C, you can see which plants already having derogations. The star, this sign, is referring to those that were not listed in the report, but examples of coal power plants from Poland, Bulgaria, and Romania causing a number of premature deaths. Again, it will happen in the first place, but also, for example, Maritsa or Ordinary, already using some different derogations, are using this Article 10C and another exceptions. And conclusions, I think it's quite obvious that cutting coal saves lives, and it's calculated and proven. There are specific methodologies available that you can see how it was all calculated. And coal power's permission to pollute is harming human health. It's like also obvious, seeing that every derogation still allows utility to pollute more and to cause another number of premature deaths and external health costs. Deadly delays are costing lives across Europe, is referring to the previous one, and stronger limits will save even more lives. There are also some demands for the EU level and national level referring PREF-PATS regulations and IED directive to publish the revised standards without delay, for example, straighten the IED directive or close loopholes in the new proposed standards, and at the national level also to set emissions in line with PAT techniques, implement new, even stricter pollution levels now by member states, and to commit to 100% coal phase-out and speedy transition to renewable sources of energy. And I will leave you with the last sentence from the Lancet Commission on Health and Climate Change. If there are any questions or comments. Okay. Sorry for crossing the time limit.
Just so you know, we are already eating into the coffee break, but I think we could still take a few questions. So, are there any questions actually?
Yes. I have, I don't know how much it's relevant. The question is the methodology which is used to calculate. Is it very complicated? I'm just thinking how much it can be used to go just beyond the water or to calculate.
The question was whether the methodology used in calculating premature deaths and external health costs is complicated, right? Yes, it is.
So you need a lot of data to put in.
Yeah, it needs a very detailed database and very comprehensive one. We used in these calculations data available from 257 of utilities, from 280 of all of them, because lack of good data that we could include into the calculations. I was not the person responsible for calculation and methodology and all this modeling. Asha, you'd like to add something? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, basically what we did was to take the emission data from the European registry EPRTR for NOx, SO2, and dust per each power station, and then kind of combined it with the meteorological data, weather data from the same year to see how much the winds and rains and spread the pollution. So basically, if you want to do this kind of modeling for few power stations, or you have really the same quality data for a number of them, then you would need to put it into this model that will calculate it through the right numbers and through the weather models. So if you're interested, then we can get you in touch with the person that was doing the modeling and see what's possible.
Yeah, exactly. We do have some people specifically working on the methodology, and it's one part is what Asha explained, is doing this modeling of dispersion of this pollution, and another thing is using some models used mainly by the WHO of it is called RAPE methodology to when we know the concentration of air pollution in particular area, then knowing how it can, for example, every raise in PM 2.5 concentration for the population of this country will cause this or this number percent increase in, for example, lung cancer or premature death. So these are two ways or two steps of modeling. First is a dispersion model, and then adding to this external, health consequences. And the third step is also monetizing. So calculating these health effects into economic cost.
Does it differ, and your model, does it differ from which is the standard one used during environmental impact assessment?
It depends on the environmental impact assessment, because there are a couple of models. In this report, we used a recommendation from WHO, normally used, but it also depends on area, because there is no one.
Standard for example, for air emissions.
It's the most commonly used one, but it happens that you can use other models.
It's for particular solutions.
Yeah, because you have modeling of emission street or emission release, taking into account all pollutants which need to be registered and reported to the registers. So there is no modeling of how it should be done, what should be calculated, and how. So I wonder if you make any improvements. I don't know. Of course, there are some additional, because you calculate monetizing, calculate debts, which are not calculated.
Yeah, and you can also read about the methodology in the report, which is very interesting, so I can just recommend you reading it anyway. But we need to move to maybe some other questions.
Sorry.
Sorry.
But I would like to add one sentence to that. Like, as I said, there are three steps, right? So the first one, and this passion model, is there are also a couple of ways to calculate it, but it's the most commonly used, as I said. And then also there are some other to be chosen, but we work on the WHO recommendation. And it's that's true that it's only the
Yeah. Question? Yeah.
I have several remarks about this presentation, about our speaker. Person, I'm not sure if you want to carry with you. You mentioned 2 to 3 billion because of, I think, total externalities globally. And then I'm wondering whether it's way too low, as in Poland is out in the commercial gas. And then in civil liability area, you usually they assign 5 million euro for, I think, for modernization.
Yeah. Yeah, it's 2 million by OECD. It's 57,700 euro per year by OECD, and we also use this data. But answering your question, maybe it's hard to repeat this question, but it's about the external health cost explanation. Yeah, sorry. Is there a follow-up of the question?
So just it seems that should be not coherent.
Yeah.
Because it's I can see by three orders of magnitude higher.
I will explain it in a second. So as you can see, for example, yeah, here, it's direct damage caused to health, excluding cost in health-determining sectors such as agriculture and water, sanitation, and it's direct damage caused to health. The thing is, and it's also very often difficult to analyze for us, that according to different calculations, not the same data is taken under consideration. So external health costs of air pollution can refer to premature deaths as such, only premature deaths. And then we calculate this 2 million, 1 to 2 million euro per year, per life. Or we also calculate lost working days, for example. Or we calculate hospital admissions. Or we calculate lower productivity, which is also monetized. So there are many specific ways of calculating external health costs, and depending on the main assumption or just the data that we would like to, or the factors that we would like to include, it can differ. And I completely agree with you. Sometimes it's confusing, and all these messages. It should be, but different bodies are just including different factors and data to these calculations.
The most tricky would be to calculate the age, because we don't know who died.
Okay, I would propose to maybe move this discussion into the coffee break. That would leave more coffee to discuss. Okay, so if there's no last pressing question, then I would propose we move to the coffee break and then come back for the next session, which will be about the national experience with Article 10C. And just before you leave, as you saw that there was quite some interest in the Article 10C and Modernization Fund within the ETS, which is very good to see. If you would like to help us with the lobby work and to make sure that the right criteria will end up in the ETS in the end, that will help to transition your countries away from coal, then just please get back to me and Urszka, and we'll make sure that we can provide you with any support, or actually can ask you to support us for different activities. So just please let us know if you can get engaged.
Okay, thanks. I have two things. One for the internet. Thank you so much for following us, and thank you for attending, and we hope you like the webinar. The presentations will be on our webpage shortly. So thank you for participating. Let me just log off, and goodbye.